Mr. Albuquerque, please, you have the floor. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to join my colleagues in expressing my gratitude for the presence of the delegation of the State of Palestine before us today and for your report. For reasons already mentioned by many of my colleagues, I believe that this review is historic. I want to express my gratitude for Madam Chung's excellent job. I believe that her analysis was not only complete but compelling about the challenges still faced by the State of Palestine for full compliance of our convention. And let me refer to the fact that Madam Chung, Monsieur Diaby, and myself took part in a very enlightening meeting 2 hours ago with NGOs from the State of Palestine and Israel. And despite the fact that they disagreed about almost every issue that was discussed, the civil and highly respectful dialogue through the three of us that they held was a proof to me about the possibility of coexistence. So it was a pity that just three of us, members of the committee, were present, but I was very impressed by the civility and the strength of the arguments presented by them in a very constructive way. Well, let me refer to an issue linked to education and the fight against racial discrimination that was already raised under some different perspectives by some of my colleagues, and especially by the rapporteur. In the beginning of this year, in January of this year, the Secretary General of the UN attended the Holocaust Remembrance ceremony in New York City's historic Park East Synagogue. In his address, he warned that anti-Semitism, which he called, and I quote, the world's oldest prejudice, end of quote, is again tormenting new generations all over the world. He pledged that the UN, and I quote again, will always be the forefront of the fight against all forms of hatred and work to strengthen efforts to uphold human dignity for all, end of quote. In August of this year, then this month, Mr. Antonio Guterres recalled that the situation in the Middle East is sometimes used as a pretext to voice anti-Semitism. In the Secretary General's words, and I quote again, to express the wish to destroy the State of Israel is an unacceptable form of modern anti-Semitism, end of quote. In general, these incidents tend to occur more frequently when tensions mount in the region, as all of us are very well acquainted with. Mr. Chairman, esteemed head of the delegation of the State of Palestine, colleagues, this committee has received, and not only in paper, but during this meeting that I referred to some minutes ago, disturbing information about the presence of anti-Semitic and discriminatory contents in textbooks used by children and teenagers in Palestinian schools. When I say that, I recognize what was expressed by the head of delegation about the review of many textbooks with discriminatory contents. But anyway, various examples of allegedly racist and anti-Semitic language contained in textbooks until 2018 at least were provided to our committee. As you know, the declaration and plan of action of the Durban Conference held in South Africa in 2001 made it clear the obligation of states to intensify their efforts in the field of education, including human rights education, in order to promote an understanding and awareness of the causes, consequences, and evils of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. The plan of action of Durban has encouraged educational authorities and the private sector to develop educational materials, including textbooks and dictionaries, aimed at combating these phenomena. Our convention, on its Article 7, obliges states parties to adopt, and I quote, immediate and effective measures, end of quote, particularly in education to combat racial discrimination, prejudice, and encourage understanding and tolerance between different racial, ethnic, and national groups. Our jurisprudence in many recommendations addressed to states, parties, and different general comments has been persistent in calling upon states to give importance to textbooks and curriculum review and amendment so as to eliminate any elements that might promote racism, racial discrimination, or reinforce negative stereotypes, and to include material that refutes such stereotypes. Dear colleagues, we all know that there is no innate atavistic racism for all human beings. Racism and racial discrimination are inherently plural and are not diffuse manifestations, since they are frequently motivated by local political projects rather than abstract theses about the scientific nature of mankind. Education is the most efficient mechanism of prevention of racial discrimination. This has been empirically attested by studies conducted inter alia by UNESCO since the beginning of the 50s. And let me tell you that if I were not convinced about the fundamental importance of human rights education to eliminate racial discrimination, I would have no interest in taking part in this honorable committee, since I have always been very skeptical about the efficiency of purely repressive responses to racial discrimination. I'm not innocent about the undeniable fact that some people, especially adults, are beyond reaching and teaching of human rights education. Surprisingly, some are hardened, not softened by exposure to plurality of ideas and diversity of peoples. But I still trust, supported by the conviction expressed by somebody who was a great friend of the Palestinian people, Nelson Mandela, that this is not necessarily true when you talk about children and preteens. I would appreciate very much if the delegation of the State Party could provide concrete and factual examples of recent reviews in textbooks eliminating direct or indirect reference to anti-Semitism and racial discrimination. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.